Hey Dave, how are you doing?
A little under the weather, but otherwise all right. How you doing?
Also good. Okay, to give you a quick update. So what I did is since the last week we discussed, just let me open this. I did some additional refactoring, more specifically on authentication. I decoupled it from the Streamlit interface that we used previously. Then I tested the open source models from Grok, and I started testing with Gemma 2 because that was like the smallest one they could, but it didn't work with Gemma 2. And then I switched to LLaMA 3.1 8 billion parameter, and I made it working with this LLaMA 3. With 8 billion parameter basically. And it was a combination of adjusting how we search, and then on adjustment on the system prompt. And so this updates I made. After when I did that, I was thinking that, okay, maybe we need to optimize the search query because what we search for, it's also important. Because currently we have a tool, like a search tool, and agent passes the not your prompt. Like if you ask question, where do I live, for example, with this 8 billion LLaMA 3.1 8 billion parameter, it searches for David's location for your questions, and that's not ideal. So I thought, okay, smaller models, they don't understand this concept like generating a search query. So I implemented the search query analysis and also rewriting. So based on one query, now it generates like from 3 to 6 subqueries, and it generates also related queries to yours. So if you ask it for like, okay, suggest me weekend activities, is going to search for your weekend activities, what you like your or dislikes activities that you, and also if you have any plans for this weekend to make sure that you don't have something overlap. And then it uses this like multiple queries and searches these data sources in parallel. So this is what uh, based on one input, it generates 3 to 6 queries, searches them all for this context, and then generates the output.
So basically, for the dumber models, you're giving it more context to work with in terms of like what you're looking for before it submits it to the model.
Yes.
And does Llama 8B do that part too, or a different model?
Uh, it does the same model that we like you specify in the config. It uses the same model for that. So yes, it works with the same LLaMA 8 billion parameter.
Cool.
And then in terms of best open source model uh, for this app, there is no like we have to test it. But from my research that I found specifically for RAG in 2025, 3 names, LLaMA models, LLaMA 3, LLaMA 3.1, 405 billion parameters, LLaMA 4, Quen models, and Mistral models. So from like these 3 names came up
What
almost.
about the 8 billion parameter distillation of DeepSeek?
I'm not sure it supports tool calling.
Ah,
We need to have the one that supports tool calling.
okay. So can you just try it with the 8? It seems like 8 billion parameters is where we're going to be at, right?
I think no, this one it's like you need to decide here and tell me, because if I will be using LLaMA 3.1 8 billion parameter, it means then I will have to write a lot of code that if you switch to, for example, to OpenAI, like you don't need this. And most users will use probably what 8 billion parameter, like open source 8 billion parameter models.
So, uh, so let me zoom out here for a second.
That's sorry, one more thing, but yes. So the advantage of using this LLaMA smaller models that you can run like potentially on any machine, good enough, which has good enough this config. The downside is with this additional coding, we increase the latency, the response time, like you ask question and how long it processes it and generates the output. With smarter models, you don't have this. Like you have almost immediate response.
Okay.
So
So let's just forget about memory for a second, and let's just talk about BrainDrive.
Yep.
I actually do not believe that you need to run locally in order to, well, let me say that a different way. I don't believe that you need to run locally on any machine, regardless of how powerful it is, in order to own your own AI system. I also believe that if you are using a managed hosting service and or you're using closed source models within your AI system, whether that's for memory or for chatting or whatever, that as long as you have the ability to switch, you're not locked in to a particular model, then you still own and control your AI system. But as soon as you lose the ability to switch, then you no longer own your own AI system. So if you have to use a particular model or you're locked in to using a particular model, then I need to own and control that, right? So that is why when we talked about embedding models, because it's very difficult to switch an embedding model once you've decided on one, correct? That we want to use an open source embedding model, right? But we're okay with using GPT-4.1 for the chat model, for the memory model, because it's easier to use another model to chat with and to interact with your memory than it is to change embedding models, right? Okay, so philosophically, that's all fine. But after, looking through the forums on this and everything, right now, that's too much nuance for people to understand, right? And right now, people are either not thinking about this concept at all and have no idea what we're talking about when we talk about ownership and local, and they don't even know I didn't even know what local was before I started down this path. And most people, if you said we're hosting it locally, no fucking idea what that means, right? That's 99% of the world, and probably even half of technical people don't even know, right? Okay. So we need to start with the local community. That's where the people are that want to do this. They are local people. Like they're talking about local models. They're in local llama. So it's a local thing, right? And so what I want to be able to do is say, we're local first. You can run this locally. Okay. That doesn't mean you always run it locally or you have to run it locally. We want to give you the ability to run it wherever you want. You can do a managed host. You can use local models. You can use closed source models. You have the freedom to do whatever you want. And we think about this in a little bit of a sliding scale. There's a spectrum. But once it's local, then I can get into all the nuance, right? But if it's not local, ears off with the existing community, right? So we need it to run local, number one, okay? I want to do that, all right? Then there's the spectrum there, right? Which is how powerful of a machine do you need to run this locally, right? And a lot of that is going to depend on how intelligent the model is that we run locally, right? But we do know that the local AI community knows that. They understand this concept that if I don't have a powerful computer, my local AI experience is going to be a lot worse than if I do have a powerful computer. And there's all sorts of talk about setting up computers that can do this, right? So we know that we can say local, but only on state of the art, right? And that's one end of the local spectrum is you need a $10,000 setup to run this locally, right? And on the other end of the spectrum is it'll run on your dad's laptop, right? And so we need to decide where we sit on that spectrum of how powerful of a machine do you need to run this? And the main determinant of that, if I'm understanding correctly, is going to be the model that we choose, right? Is it an 8 billion parameter? Is it a 70 billion parameter? Is it a 405 billion parameter model? What is it, right? Okay. And so my answer to that question is, to start with, is what's the smallest model that we can get this working well with, right? And what does working well mean? It means accurate and relatively fast. It doesn't have to be, I think the reasoning models that have come out recently have trained people that, like, if I wait a minute, I can get a lot better answer. And I think that that's fine. And it's not like there's fast memory now and we're going to be slow. There's no memory now, right? Okay. So we can sacrifice some speed, but if I have to sit there for 5 minutes to get an answer every time, like, it's useless, right? If it's 30 seconds, that's fine, right? Okay. So so my thing is, it feels to me, just from what we know about these models, that going below 8 billion is probably a non-starter, right? 8 billion seems to be the starting point for anything serious in AI. Is that accurate? Okay. It also seems like the starting point for anything serious that's seriously competitive with the closed source models in any fashion seems to be at sort of that 70 billion parameter level, right? Okay. So, so I would say that's our range, right? If we need a 70 billion parameter model to make this work, then you still can run a 70 billion parameter model on a high-end AI PC, right?
Yes, and I just want to make some adjustment here. And maybe you saw that, like some blog posts or YouTube videos where people claim, okay, I have set up something with like small model, like 8 billion parameter, and it outperforms ChatGPT or something like that. And the way they set up this, if you notice, there is like paper open rack framework. It's like different people, scientists, they designed this framework. And in their test, they used, I think, LLaMA 2, 7 billion parameters.
Okay.
From their tests and to their like evaluations, yes, it outperforms the ChatGPT, specifically for RAG. And how they design this, like they break down these tasks into small tasks, and on each step they call this LLM for specific thing. And yes, because you are not paying for tokens, you're hosting this LLM locally, it makes sense. You can do, like, you can call LLM the many times you want to to get the output you want. And we can do that too if we start using like LLaMA, let's say LLaMA 3.1 8 billion parameters. We can make this BrainDrive work similar to, not as good as, but similar to ChatGPT or Anthropic models. And the problem here is, okay, we'll have to compensate for that accuracy by adjusting how many times we call this LLM. Right?
I was plugging my computer in and I missed the first part of what you said. So start over, please.
Okay. So initially, BrainDrive, I designed this setup with working with OpenAI 4.0 or 4.1 model, correct?
Yes.
This model is smart and intelligent. You don't host it locally, and you need to consider also the token usage, correct? like how many times you call this model and how many, like what's the context window, how many like contexts you pass. You need to consider this cost, like because it needs to be cost effective too. But it worked. Now we designed, like we are testing it with like smaller models, like 8 billion parameters, LLaMA 3.1, and it doesn't work the same way as OpenAI, but we can make it close enough to that experience with OpenAI. How we need to increase how many times, like we need to increase how many times we call this model. Like we need to break down into smaller tasks and call this, okay, yeah, here's the first step. Here's step 1.1, 1.2.
Right. And let me explain this back to you because I
Yes.
understand now. If I have someone that I'm working with at that's really experienced, I can say, go do this, and they go and do
Yes.
it, right?
Yes.
But if I
Yes.
have someone, that's the big model, that's ChatGPT 4.1. But if I have someone that's entry level and they can do stuff, but like they don't have any experience, they're not as smart, I need to break it down for them into smaller chunks, and that's what you're talking about.
Yes, and for them, it's not it like potentially it will be like 10 steps. For ChatGPT, it's only one step, and we can do that. 10 steps, we can do that. It's fine. But then our code base will become complex. Let's say if user switches, okay, I don't want LLaMA, I want OpenAI. It means the system will go through these 10 steps too with OpenAI. You understand, right?
Yeah, I understand, right? So we're trying to make our system modular so that you can swap in and out models, et cetera. But this complicates that process because the OpenAI model doesn't need the 10 steps, and so you're slowing it down and creating additional queries and all that stuff and costs when you don't need to. Um, yeah, I understand that, but can't you just make it easy to take those steps out? BrainDrive itself may be a solution to this too, right? Inside of BrainDrive, you're going to have plugins, right? And it's going to contain this code, right? The plugin, right? And so you can just have a local plugin, and you can have a non an OpenAI plugin or whatever, depending on what you want to do with your memory. What about that?
Say again. So, for example, you're saying, okay, this BrainDrive memory can be integrated as a plugin to BrainDrive, but with like two plugins. One BrainDrive memory with OpenAI, one
Yeah,
BrainDrive.
or actually, let me say this another way. BrainDrive plugins, it's just going to work with the API for BrainDrive memory, right? And
Yes.
so perhaps we just need two separate BrainDrive memories, one for dumb models and one for smart models, for example, right?
Okay.
But you're saying, I understand what you're saying is like that even if we split it up, it makes it more complicated because now we have two repositories that we have to maintain.
No, that's fine. That's actually better. Like we can split. One will work with like paid APIs, paid AIs like Anthropic, Gemini, and OpenAI, and the other one will be for open source model, like for local to run it locally. And we can do that. That I think will be much better.
And then you'll be able to select the API you want within BrainDrive.
Within BrainDrive, yes, it will like if someone wants to integrate BrainDrive memory with local host model, they will integrate, like they will select
Let
this.
me just see if I can get Dave on the phone to join the call because I want him to I want to see I want him to hear this. All right, he's not picking up. All right. Yeah, I think that's the way to do it. Local memory.
You don't want to separate them, right? Your idea, like initially, you want to have all only one repo, but if they use open source model, so it follows that flow with 10 extra steps. But if it's
Yeah,
OpenAI
there's
or something,
something that I didn't say before that I should have. We're also betting, and so far the trend has definitely been true, that the smaller models are going to get smarter and smarter over time. So the things that we can do with GPT-4.1 today, maybe in a year or two, we'll be able to do with LLaMA's 8 billion parameter model, right? That's the trend, right? So I think we're also like we're betting on local and we're also giving you a stopgap of if it's not working well enough for you, if BrainDrive memory local, we'll have to figure out the names for this shit. But if BrainDrive memory local is not working well enough for you or it's too slow or whatever, you can go BrainDrive memory cloud or whatever, and it's going to work a lot better.